Ancient humans once lived on this island along the coast of southeast Alaska. Today, Native peoples and scientists are working together to explore the legacy of early life that was recently discovered on a cave on the island. Human remains recovered from the cave are the oldest ever found in northern North America. Their discovery has inspired a remarkable alliance among Native tribes, scientists, and federal agencies.
The project itself was a paleontological project in its earliest stages, and when Tim Heaton was working at the cave in 1996 in his third field season, and right towards the end of his project on the 4th of July 1996, he discovered the human remains in a portion of a rear chamber of the cave that he had just decided to take one last look in before he closed up for the season. And when he got these bones that he had recovered out and cleaned them off in the light outside the cave, he realized that he had some human remains. And at that point he stopped excavation, ceased his project, and contacted me.
Fifield immediately helicoptered to the site to meet with Tim Heaton and to examine what he had found.
Let's see, where shall we place the log? This is the room we call the second room of the Bear Passage, and it's the room where we found the human remains, and where we also found the very first bear fossils, and where a lot of our best stuff has come from. The room used to be up to about this level with sediment when I first entered it. A stream began down in this area, but it was right about here where a bear femur was eroding out. And when we dated it, it dated at 35,000 years. It showed it was much older than anything we'd been working with before. So in 1996, when we first started excavating, Fred Grady and I, we started excavating up this way through this kind of the stream bed. And it was when we reached the corner up here that we came upon the human remains.
As the Forest Service archaeologist for this district, I took possession of those human remains and began the process under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. The following morning I called the tribal presidents of the Craig and Kuwoot tribes and notified them of the discovery, and then set up meetings during the next week.
With help from the NAGPR coordinator for the Tlingit and Haida Central Council, Fifield scheduled a meeting in Kuwoot with representatives of the Kuwoot, Craig, and Kake tribal governments. This meeting initiated the consultation phase, which is a different process than notification.
Consultation involves asking the potentially affected tribes how they think we should proceed with this situation. Should we allow study? Should we stop now and rebury the remains? Or what would they like to see done? At that point, the Forest Service is required to consult. They're not necessarily required to do what the tribes want them to do, but they're required to consult and to weigh that information in the decision that they make.
One of the things that people, especially in the Tlingit world, say that we shouldn't do is to excavate where our people might be buried. And we have a lot of things happening in our world today. And when I heard discoveries of caves and finding human remains, I had a lot of mixed feelings about them.
Our first feeling is no, because we're taught respect. You don't dig up graves.
In preparation for the meeting, Fifield contacted Jim Dixon, an archaeologist who had worked on the question of early humans in southeast Alaska. Dr. Dixon offered the facilities of the Denver Museum of Natural History to study the remains and to develop a plan for future excavations in collaboration with the tribes. Fifield presented this proposal at the meeting.
And one thing about the debate at the tribal council meeting, when we first talked about what to do, there certainly wasn't a unanimous decision that we should study the bones. There were 2 or 3 people that stood up and said, no, we should bring them right back and return them to the ground. But more people stood up and said, we need to know something about this person. We need to know who he was. We need to know, where he might have come from and how he lived, and something about him and how he is related to us, and either in lifestyle or in ancestry. And so they were not at all convinced that they knew who this person was. They wanted to know more about it. And I think it's that curiosity from the traditional point of view linked with the curiosity from the scientific point of view that really drives this project and links the agencies, the scientists, and the tribal interests together.
Because of the respect for someone that has passed on, as a rule, that wouldn't be, the gravesite wouldn't be touched. But we've had to weigh the pros and cons.
I have to say that there were some folks who were not happy with the archaeological work, the scientific investigation, the intrusive investigation, but by and large, most of our people, at least as I heard the people talk at this clan leaders historical sites workshop, that they were very happy that the work was going forward. And actually we were trying to figure out how are we going to develop this process. We want a formalized memorandum of agreement or understanding as to how we are going to work together, or what we are going to do when new archaeological sites are discovered. However, I should note that in no way will Native people allow for the disturbance of their spiritual and sacred sites. And those are primarily those that are associated with shaman graves and shaman burials. Those sites we absolutely do not want to have disturbed, nor do we want to have any archaeological or scientific investigations of those sites.
My main interest in the whole thing is for historical reasons, and to find out how long, humans have lived here. And to me, it's part of history, and it's exciting that it's happened here on Prince of Wales Island in Alaska, and we have Alaskan people involved in the process, and so it's pretty exciting.
The tribes and the scientists agreed to work together to study the remains and conduct further excavations at the cave. The basis of this partnership was consultation and community involvement. If the site turned out to be a burial ground, the Kuwoot Tribal Council stipulated that the archaeologists would cease work and return to the tribe for further consultation.
This is one of the more important archaeological sites found in North America in recent years. Its significance rests in the fact that it has the oldest human remains ever discovered in Alaska and Canada. The human remains are not a deliberate human burial, but rather scattered bones of an individual. And many of the bones have puncture marks in them, which suggests that they've been modified by carnivores. In other words, this individual may not have died in the cave or been buried in the cave, but possibly dragged into the cave by scavengers. He may have been killed in the cave in a hunting incident with bears. Who knows? We just don't know. But the few bones that remain are very important and tell us a lot scientifically. His teeth were in excellent condition. We can determine his age because the wisdom teeth are just erupting. This one has actually erupted and made contact with the upper jaw and just slightly worn. This one has not made contact with the upper teeth yet. So we know that this is a individual in his early 20s. We also have found the pelvis, part of the pelvis to this individual, and it clearly indicates that he was a male. So we know that these are the remains of a young man in his early 20s who lived on Prince of Wales Island, Alaska, about 9,200 years ago. The reason we know his age is that the mandible was originally found in two fragments. It was broken in half. It's been reconstructed here. It was broken right along this line right here. And with a very small drill, like a dentist drill, we were able to drill into the bone and take a very small amount of bone, probably no more organic material that might be removed from your teeth if the dentist were drilling your teeth.
The radiocarbon dates had to be adjusted to represent calendar years. Applying a set of standard corrections and calibrations, the scientists determined that the young man had actually lived around 10,300 years ago.
I guess most of the archaeological work that's been done here in Southeast, or at least I call it the early literature, talks about Tlingit people being here for just a couple thousand years. And this find on Prince of Wales Island certainly confirmed that Native people were here much longer than that 9,000, 10,000 years ago. And that certainly they were also adapted to the coastal life.
This new information about maritime adaptation at the end of the last ice age was revealed by further analysis of the remains.
We were able to do isotope analysis on the bone, and this clearly demonstrated that this young man was raised on marine foods. In fact, his isotopic signature is similar to that of ring seals, whales, ocean fish. In other words, this young man was totally adapted to a maritime economy. He was raised on seafood.
His seafood diet, fish, shellfish, and marine mammals, shows that he was fully adapted to the ocean. At the same time, 10,000-year-old stone tools discovered in the cave deepen our understanding of the maritime capabilities of his culture.
We have several periods of time when people have lived in the cave, but at this point in time we find these microblades made out of obsidian. We also have some made out of quartz crystal, exotic rock types that don't occur on that island today.
This is very important because it demonstrates that humans had trade routes or access to these far-flung sources of stone at this very early date. The obsidian, for example, comes from another island called Tongass Island, as well as the mainland of British Columbia at a source called Mount Isiza. The significance of the human's diet, as well as the far-flung source materials for the obsidian, clearly indicate that people had watercraft at this time. They had established trade routes, were making their living from the sea, and were skilled intercoastal navigators. This type of adaptation to the environment, particularly an environment as rich and complex as the northwest coast of North America, indicates that people must have been here much longer. In other words, to develop trade routes, settlement patterns, and subsistence patterns, this complex doesn't happen overnight, and people probably lived in this region much longer. In other words, the individual that we found preserved in this cave is probably the descendant of people that have lived in this area for many years prior to that time.
All through the Indian legends of our history, our people moved on the ocean. Then they traveled the coast and went down perhaps as far as San Francisco on these canoes from Alaska. Our people were a seafaring people. We lived off the ocean. We ate everything the ocean had to provide for our people.
Each clan has a unique history of its origin and migration along the northwest coast. Many of the stories describe events related to ice and periods of glaciation. How far back in time the histories go is unknown. What is known is that these stories parallel the evidence that is emerging from the new science.
Much can be gained by incorporating local oral history with archaeological data. Both sources of information can really enhance each other and create a more holistic picture of the past. For example, the oral history of the Tlingit people refer to periods of rising sea level, retreating glaciers, this sort of thing. And these kinds of data are preserved and documented archaeologically.
After the last ice age, my family, according to our history, ended up in Canada and stayed down there maybe for hundreds of years. And one day the people decided they needed to move back home. And so they started their migration north from Canada, and they ended up at Tree Point, and I don't know how long they stayed there south of Ketchikan, a place called Cape Fox. And from there they ended up again on Annette Island, and then they moved forward again, and they moved to Union Bay, all through Clarence Straits, and ended up on the north end of Prince of Wales Island, and they stayed in Red Bay for the longest time. They always kept the story alive of where we came from in KQ Straits on the west side of Kupernoff Island.
The fact that these oral histories preserve this information in such vivid detail and clear detail strongly suggests that there's a direct link between the people living in the region today and the people that lived here thousands of years ago. What this means in terms of human colonization is that there's an alternative hypothesis now that's very viable for the first colonization of North America. In other words, humans could have come along the west coast of the Americas, actually along the southern margin of the Bering Land Bridge from Asia, along the west coast of the Americas, colonizing and settling in these unglaciated pockets and refugia, slowly working their way southward until they entered the more southern latitudes of North America. This is known to most of us as the coastal migration hypothesis.
The young man found in the cave belonged to an ancient maritime culture that lived along the North Pacific coast at the end of the last ice age. This sophisticated sea adaptation was more like the complex Northwest Coast cultures of today than scientists ever imagined. In an era when the goals of scientists often clash with native interests, why did this partnership work?
The success of the consultation in this case can be attributed to both the Forest Service and the Tlingit people themselves. The Forest Service acted immediately after they had discovered the human remains in terms of starting the consultation process. And then secondly, they acknowledged that they were dealing with sovereign tribal entities. And so I thought they proceeded in a very respectful manner rather than in the adversarial relationships that I've seen characterizing other consultation processes.
The Tlingit, whose highly structured social organization is based on moieties and clans, have a long history of dealing with government officials on their own terms. This historical political expertise greatly facilitated the consultation process.
Given this setting here in this small community where I was going to go and talk to people that I already knew in some ways, I knew we would be friendly and professional about how we dealt with it.
If you hear a land manager say, we're going to begin an activity or a project, or there's going to be some scientific data investigation, or we're thinking of issuing a permit, and you hear them mention the names of the people that they think they better talk to, now you're listening to a land manager who is in touch with the tribes, who's in touch with all the people who may have an interest. That individual knows what they need to do, and it's probably a very satisfying experience to work with that person and for that person to work with the tribes, because it bespeaks of an ongoing trust and a relationship that's built over time, a good relationship.
The research team kept the tribal governments informed about the project. This enabled the native communities to be involved in the decision-making process.
One of the things that we've tried to do as scientists working at this site is to share the information that we have been able to obtain with the local people. And I think this is a very important aspect of the partnership and the trust that's been developed over the years. Specifically, the tribal governments have requested that we share scientific discoveries, information, radiocarbon dates, and the results of our work with them prior to sharing it with the rest of the world. Some colleagues have suggested this is censorship or unnecessary restrictions on our research. I don't believe it is. I believe this is a very clear case of cooperation and respect, and just good behavior between peoples. In other words, sharing the data locally before you share it nationally.
I think the stereotype is that archaeologists typically come in, dig things up, and take them home with them, and nobody ever knows what happened or what was found. Especially, and that's an especially sensitive situation for Native Americans, whose ancestors are being excavated. So what they wanted was to make sure that that didn't happen. They wanted to know what was going on throughout the life of the project and to be involved in the decisions and the information sharing that was part of the project too.
Another way the communities were involved was by bringing interns in to help with the excavations. First proposed by the scientists and funded by the National Science Foundation and Sea-Alaska Corporation, the internship program brought together the educational goals of the local communities, Native tribes, and the archaeologists.
I think that the internship program is fantastic. Number one, because we have Alaska Natives or Alaskan people that are actually going in and digging and being involved in the process, and hopefully they're going to want to continue their education in archaeology.
I'm a social studies teacher at Ketchikan High School, and to hear what's been going on and some of the different theories that are popping up and the work that's being done out here and how that may change the other theories that are out there was really exciting, because then I can take that back into the classroom and share with them that our books are being changed, and in their lifetime they will see that happen.
Well, when I first went out to the site, or even before I went out to the site, I was real nervous about the whole project, the whole idea of digging up bones, and that really was awkward for me until I started talking to some of the elders that were in the community, and they really encouraged me to go ahead and study it and go out and participate with the project in the interest of what we could learn and how it can be applied to today's society.
The Native interns struggled to integrate their traditional beliefs with the world of science.
To have the opportunity to work here seemed, as a professional, an exciting opportunity, but at the same time I think I had ignored how I really felt as an American Native here. I didn't resolve that in my mind before I came out, and when some of those bear bones were uncovered and we weren't sure if they were bear or human, really scared me, because of the spirituality that we have as natives from this area. And so I think that's, it bothered me enough to when we had our R&R, I did talk to some people to have them give me their perspectives on how they see this particular project, and to calm any fears that I had. And everybody was very positive about it and said go for it. And I think Yarrow, who's the Sea-Alaska intern out here this summer, who's also a Tlingit Indian, but from Kuwoot, I think put it very well. She said, Linda, I'm looking at it as my great-great-great-great uncle still teaching me, which happens in the Tlingit culture, is you learn things from your uncle. So that was a neat way of hearing it. And then to talk to some of the people in Kuwoot who said, this just verifies that there were people here thousands and thousands of years ago, because there are still groups of people out there who refuse to acknowledge that the different native groups existed. And we're not saying that these are Tlingits or Haidas or anybody else. It just says there were people here, and the native peoples here are saying we've been here a long time.
After I got out there and started working with the scientists, it really opened my eyes to a new way of thinking in terms of my own history and studying that. It's really important to my people to know where they come from, and our stories say that we've lived in this area since time immemorial, and now the rest of the world is starting to realize that maybe that's true.
The Tlinkits have supported scientific research, and in doing this they are unlike many other Native Americans who don't support scientific research of human remains. And I would say that the basis of this support comes from the Tlingit worldview associated with Hashukun or Hashuka. And under this belief, the Tlinkits believe that they have very strong bonds with their ancestors and also with future generations. And so when a discovery is made, their assumption is that they're going to support scientific research because they believe that their ancestors are going to be providing them with additional knowledge.
From the study of the ancient past at this small Alaskan cave came not only insights into the very early human history of the Pacific Northwest, but also a new understanding of the lifeways of these early people, their deep connection with the sea and a maritime way of life. A sense of partnership and collaboration was fostered and sustained through open and meaningful dialogue between the tribes and the research team. Community involvement in the project enhanced the cooperative process. Positive personal relationships developed and scientists participated in community events. The partners learned to understand and value each other's points of view. Native interns were invited to make presentations of their perspectives at professional meetings. Through respect and cooperation, everyone has gained new insights and knowledge about the history of Southeast Alaska and North America.
We're in a world where our existence 10,000 years ago on this land is always in question. Somebody always stands up and says, "I don't believe you folks." And yet, I find that these archaeological explorations that are taking place, and the Forest Service is helping us greatly in this area. It's dating our people's existence properly in this country. And we need these kinds of information from our ancestors, even though they aren't physically speaking, but they really are giving us a message that they were here. And I come to the conclusion that we need to find these kinds of old places where people lived. And if we can carbon date the existence of our people, we find that we were here way more than 10,000 years ago.
Samajiana Asklewana, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ah, hey ya, hey ya, ah, hey ha, hey ha. Dootle Asamaje, Dootle Asamaje, Asamajiana Asklewana, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ah, hey ya, hey ya, ah, hey ha, hey ha. Dootle Asamaje, Dootle Asamaje, Asamadiana Asklewana, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ah, hey ya, hey ya, ah, hey ha. Yindayan Kayaha, Dootle Asamaje, Dootle Asamaje, Asamadiana Asklewana, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ah, hey ya, ah, hey ha.